Rain came soft over the red walls of Riverrun, a thin, gleaming veil that laid down a scent of wet brick and iron and the crushed green of the river reeds. Robb Stark walked the ramparts alone but for the shadow that padded at his heels. Grey Wind's fur slicked into charcoal spikes under the drizzle, and the great wolf shook once, hard, sending cold droplets against Robb's boots. Below them the tumblestone wore a sheath of pewter and glass, and beyond it the red fork moaned as it shouldered driftwood and broken branch and the foam torn from the falls. The banners hung heavy along the crenels. Even soaked, the paper-gray dire wolf of House Stark snapped more sharply than the snuff torches, as though the cloth still remembered a wind that had not yet come. Robb set his hands on the gritty stone. Rain laced his lashes and salted the sigh he hadn't meant to let out. His mail dragged at his shoulders like a promise. He had not slept, not truly. Dreams had been maps more than dreams, dotted with hardened knots where men sat and starved behind walls, and with the crude little crowns carved in his mind to mark the lords who would bend or break. Strategy crept in when he tried to rest, and when he rose strategy slipped away, leaving the ache of faces and names. He saw his fathers in all of them at first. He tried not to. Grey Wind's ears pricked. Robb followed the wolf's gaze along the inner ward, down to the tower door where a small, pale boy hovered, drowned to the elbows in a cloak too big for him. A guard's hand propelled him forward. The boy clutched a waterproofed leather tube against his chest as if he feared it would leap of its own accord over the parapet into the river. "Bring him up," Robb called. His voice came out level. The guard nodded and ushered the boy beneath the arch that led up the tight-pitched stair within the tower. Robb waited. The rain kept falling, thin as needles and as regular. Somewhere beyond the right-hand curtain wall, a stable hand sang to a fretful mare, the sound of it as fragile as breath on glass. The boy emerged panting, hair streaming, eyes rounder for the way the wolf had turned toward him. Grey Wind took 2 light steps and lifted his muzzle to sniff. The boy's gaze clung to Robb, then skittered like a startled fish. "From the south, your grace," he blurted, thrusting the tube forward with both hands as if it were a sword he did not know how to hold. Seal wax beaded its mouth, green through the beads of water, pressed with a 5-petaled flower. "Was bid bring it to the king in the north and to no other." "Good lad." Robb took the tube. The seal was smart work. A creamy rose couched in green leaves, edged like real petals. Whoever had said it had done so carefully, and more than once. He felt Caitlin in that thought without wanting to. He broke the wax with his thumb. The parchment slid out slowly, reluctant as though it had learned caution in the tube. Grey Wind sniffed it, then sneezed at the resin. Robb unfolded the letter under the rain. The ink had not run. The hand was even and elegant, flatter than the swoops the maesters taught, and as sure. He read the words once, and then again, and by the second reading the rain had vanished and the parapet had vanished, and there was only the pale scraping line of those letters. He did not speak for a long breath. The boy shifted and licked his lips. "There was a second message, your grace. For the Lady Caitlin. I'll see to it." Robb folded the letter upon itself cleanly, slid it back into the tube, set the tube against his belt. He gave the boy a coin anyway, and one of the guards stepped forward to see him dry and fed. When the boy's steps had vanished into the stairwell, Robb turned back to look out at the river, but the river was a blurred thing now, indistinct, a ribbon of gray and iron moving without purpose in a world that had just gained too many. Grey Wind pressed his head against Robb's hip. The king's hand dropped into the wet fur, and he felt the heat of the beast's ear against his wrist. "What do you make of a rose bearing teeth?" he murmured to the wolf. "My Lord Warden of the Red Fork will say it has no bite at all unless you let it twine around your throat." Grey Wind huffed and lay down. He would have to summon a council. He would have to take the letter to his mother's hands. He would have to measure 20 men's tempers before he allowed one to see his own. Rain licked his jaw. The rose on the seal had been pale as milk. He found his mother in a chamber that looked east because she liked to see the mornings come. She stood by the hearth with her sleeves rolled past her wrists, warming her hands as if a river winter had already settled into the stones, though it was only rain cold outside. When he came in, she looked up at once, and the caution in her eyes told him that she had learned over these months to weigh the way he walked, the angle of his mouth, the set of his shoulders. He hated that she had needed to learn it. "Another list of men who will not bend the knee?" Caitlin asked, and her voice was the low, certain one that had soothed him over and over when he had been younger and fear had had other names. "No." "A flower that thinks itself a shield." Robb held out the tube. She dried her hands on the linen towel by the hearth and took it from him. Her fingers paused over the seal, unreadable. She broke it and read. The fire played on her face, made of it something carved and eternal, a thing that had always been and would be. When she had finished, she closed her eyes as if quiet might change the words. "From Olenna Redwine," she said at last. "Written for Lord Mace, and yet not by his will alone, I would swear. And here," she touched the lower lines, "here the hand changes. This is the daughter. She names herself plainly enough. Margaery." She said the syllables carefully. Some names she made into knives. This one came out as if she were testing it for weight. She held the page out to the firelight, reading it again, then looked up. They would meet. They would speak of grain and ships and men at arms and of midwives' gossip dressed in velvet. And they would speak of vows. They would speak of a marriage, Robb said, and tasted the word as if it were unfamiliar. He had carried it in his head all his life and not felt how it scraped until now. "To me, to the king in the north," Caitlin said. She folded the parchment along the same lines he had and slid it back into the tube. She set the tube on the table beside the chessboard where neither of them had moved a piece for days. "And that is not a thing they would write without counting every crumb that would fall from the platter if it tipped. She is her mother's daughter mayhap, but she is more her grandmother's. Olenna is no fool, nor am I. A rose at my side brings more than a sweet scent. It brings a thorn made of Lannister gold if I am not careful, and eyes upon my hand every time I try to reach for a sword. And it brings food." Caitlin's hands went to the corners of the table, and she gripped the wood. "Grain, wagons of it. Ships if the red wines can be coaxed to the right sort of disobedience. And men who know how to lay a siege and how to feed one. It brings the reach, if you can hold them faithful. They ran to Renly when it suited them. They sent their flower to a bar of stormlight and called it a crown. And when the candle was snuffed, they did not carry it to the tomb. And yet here is a letter. Robb." She reached for him then, and he took her hand before he thought, surprised again by the feel of it, the sparse strength in the bones, the capable, neat nails. "A war eats. Your wolves fall upon the west and the riverlands bleed. I have watched you count loaves like coins. You speak in provisions now, whether you know it or not. Men can be won with honor and oaths. Armies are kept moving with bread. The rose has mills and orchards and ships. You know this. I know it." He let go her hand and stepped away, not out of anger, but because he had learned that if he stood too close to the hearth when she looked at him like that, something inside his breast burned worse than any other flame. "But Mother Walder Frey," Caitlin's mouth thinned. He saw the line his father's mouth had made when he had been disappointed, and he had to look away again. "Walder Frey," she said, and in both words she put 30 years of memory, and a long ride to a cold bridge, and the unpleasantness of being forced to remind an old man of the value of his name. "You promised, and any cure for that will cost a price. If you accept this letter's offer, the price must be paid promptly and in full." He heard the old man's laugh then, dry and a little wet, as if from a chest that collected its own weather. He heard the cawing of crows on the towers of the twins, the slap of river mud, the arguments wove into the stone. He had been young when he had promised, and now he was older and the promise was younger, that was all. "I will call a council," he said, "and I would have you there for every word of it." She inclined her head, which she could make into a bow or a nod or a shrug, depending on how she held her mouth. Today it was acceptance. "I will send for them. You cannot keep this to letters. You must let them see how you carry it." He left her to her messengers and her fire. Gray wind waited for him in the hall, shaking rainwater out of his coat over the rushes. The great wolf sneezed after the sneeze he had given the letter, then bumped his king's hip again as if to remind him that not all decisions were ink and sealing wax. Robb bent to ruffle the wet fur between the beast's ears and then straightened as the first of his lords came up the stair. The Great John filled a doorway before he entered it. He blustered in, booming laughter ahead of him like a drum roll, with wet hair draped over his temples and a smell of soaked leather. Behind him moved Lord Karstark, gray with grief in a way that no rain could darken further, and Roose Bolton with his silent pink smile, and Galbart Glover, tall and tired as a besieged pine, and Edmure Tully with nerves that jittered under his skin whenever he tried to clasp them down. Ser Brynden drifted in last, like a heron, bringing the river's chill with him. They settled around the table, pulling chairs forward, drawing knives to cut cheese and to cut sausage and to cut the steam-laden air with impatience. Robb did not speak until he had looked each of them in the face. He had learned that much, too. "A letter from the south," he said, and did not yet say from whom. "An offer of bread and men and alliance. The purchase price is known to all of you." "You are wed already?" Karstark said harshly, and his hands whitened on the chair back where he did not sit. "In promise." He never sat anymore. Sitting broke a man's guard. "You swore for a bridge. A king who breaks his word breaks more than a bridge. A king who lets his men starve for the sake of a bridge breaks his kingdom," the Great John answered. "Show us the letter, boy. Or must we all pretend we do not see the green stain dripping off your sleeve?" Robb slid the tube along the table and pushed it toward Brynden, who had the patience to read without letting his mouth answer before his eyes had considered. The Blackfish read, then handed it to Edmure, who swallowed, and to Glover, whose mouth flattened, and to Bolton, whose eyes did not change but who sat straighter, and to Karstark, who refused it with a flick of his fingers as if it were a snake, and to the Great John, who held it upside down for a moment, squinted, turned it, and grunted when he saw the rose on the seal. "Aye, the Tyrells," the Great John said, "fat with bread and boys and bees. They play at war the same way my cousin's sons play at knucklebones. We could do worse than make them stand behind our throw. Tyrell bread feeds Tyrell mouths first. Roose," E. Bolton observed, his voice mild as water in a basin. "And Tyrell loyalty is to what the wind blows toward. It has blown south for generations. It is the wind that fills ships," Caitlin said from the doorway. She came in without ceremony and laid a bundle of damp, folded replies on the high shelf by the hearth. "I have never heard of a man rowing grain upriver by cursing the breeze. Lady Caitlin." Bolton's pale eyes flicked toward her and away, and he smoothed the suede over his knee. "No one doubts your skill with rope and sail." "The girl is young," Karstark said. He had not moved. "And the grandmother is old and the father a fool. It is a net cast toward us, and it will tangle the feet of our wolves. Call something sweet by sweeter names as you like, but a trap is a trap." "Or a ladder," Edmure said, and flushed when Karstark turned slowly to look at him. "There is no insult meant. Only, if they will not bend to us, they may bleed us. If they will bend, they will stiffen us. Lord Karstark, we were glad for your boys' spears at the Green Fork. If we had had more of the sort of men who grow in the reach to plant where we needed them, we would have had fewer graves. Bread makes men patient. It also lets them march. You know this as well as any." Karstark's face changed then, not because Edmure had convinced him, but because the thought of his son's graves had moved through him like a cold knife. "Do not tell me what I know," he said, but the words were dull, worn smooth by the fingers of his loss. He looked at Robb. "The question is the vow. If you will throw it down and grind it under your heel because you like the smell of roses, then do it. I will not bend my neck to watch. But do not call it prudence and expect me to hear anything but cowardice in it." He left without waiting to be dismissed, his cloak dragging wet over the rushes, water dripping from his iron-wreathed hair. A guard half rose. Robb shook his head, and the guard sank. The room swallowed Karstark's absence the way a marsh takes footprints. "His grief makes his tongue worse company than usual," the Great John said after a pace of quiet. "He will come around when he has shouted himself hoarse at his shadow." "He will not," Roose Bolton said. But the king's council is not a place to comfort the bereft. Your grace, if this can be made to work, it must be done swiftly. A half measure will be 2 defeats sewn together. If you are to take the rose, take it openly and in both hands. If you are to throw it away, throw it far enough that its scent does not cling to your cloak. Brynden Tully set the letter down. The girl's words are clever, he said. There is humility in them, and a prickle where she knows you will not feel it through your glove. And the grandmother's words, those are full of old wisdom and old pride. They want what they always want. Standing, security, a piece of any crown that might be being hammered out. They will not bend their necks without a cushion. You may have to make one for them out of someone else's back. Someone like Walder Frey, Edmure muttered. Or you, Brynden said, and smiled without malice. Your grace. Robb looked down at his hands. He thought of a bridge and a brittle old man with his sons and daughters like coins spilled from a bursa, and of a small girl with a shy smile who might or might not be that same old man's most precious, kept back for this very bargain. He thought of his father, who would have kept his oath if the world were falling into ashes around him for being so inflexible, and of ice and of winter and of a child's feet running through snow that stung like laughter. He closed his fists and opened them again. We will answer, he said. We will ask for an envoy. They must send one of their blood, and with terms in writing with seals that do not flake under the first heat. We will not discuss marriage before we have grain counted in bushels, not baskets, and ships named, not guessed. We will, above all, set out what the North will remain. I will not have my lords think I traded their wolf for a rose, and then found myself in a garden fenced by other men's hands. You mean to sound cautious, Roose Bolton said. And you sound as if you want this. We should wish to help you find the right language. The great John snorted. We should wish to get the right casks driven into the river before it freezes. We should wish to see flour at Moat Cailin, and hope any man of ours in the neck can smell the difference between that and swamp. Caitlin lifted her eyes toward her son. I will write the reply, but I think they will send more than an envoy. They will send a brother. Loras is not a bridge, Edmure said carefully. Garland, Brynden said. They will send Garland. He smiles with Loras's mouth and thinks with Olenna's mind, and he knows not to show the thinking until the smiling has worn men's patience down to tenderness. He is the brother they send where no one expects a Tyrell spear to kill, because they believe a Tyrell spear should be soft. But if they send him, we will be the ones who bruise if we are slow. Robb nodded. Then we will not be slow. They wrote. The table that had not seen chess saw ink and maps. Robb signed where his mother pointed, and his wax burned where his father had had his own poured before him. The raven took the rolled parchment and beat its way into the rain, its black wings working with the stubbornness of any northern thing. When the chamber had fallen silent except for the fire and the distant river, Robb went down to the practice yard and poured his thoughts into wood. Gray Wind watched from the doorway of the armory with the serene disdain of a creature who had never needed a blade for anything. The rain eased. Late that afternoon, when the hall was as close to warm as the autumn would allow, a rumor got to the guards before the horn did. Men looked toward the gatehouse with the automatic turning of heads that came of Longmont. Taches of waiting. A second horn call announced a party under truce. There were 8 of them, cloaks for rain, woven broad, and they rode under a banner that had been wrapped in linen despite the wet as if to keep it untouched by northern weather. The man at the fore had a face like a hawk that had learned to smile and kept the beak sharpened anyway. He swung down from his horse at the first gate, left his sword and his dagger without flinching to the keeping of the garrison, and came in with his hands empty. Lord Garland Tyrell, he said into the cool of the hall. My grandmother sends her regards, which are warmer. My father sends his statements, which are heavier. My sister sends her hopes, which she has wrapped in ribbon to keep them from slipping out. I bring all 3. I am Caitlin Stark, Robb's mother said, stepping down from the dais. And this is my son. You may call him your grace. She stopped for the span of 2 breaths in front of him and let her eyes travel over him the way she might have looked at a horse she meant to buy or a man who had brought a thing in his hands he wanted changed to coin. You are far from your gardens. Gardens grow roses and radishes whether the man who owns them walks among the beds or sits in a hall counting rents, Garland said, smiling. My brother sings better than I do, and my father likes better the sound of his own voice than of mine. I am better at walking where the weeds are. My mother would like you, the great John muttered to Galbart Glover. Glover did not answer. His eyes had gone to the man behind Garland, a broad, blocky Hightower captain with a face that looked carved for honor, and then farther along. Of the 8, 3 were Hightower men, 2 wearing small red wine badges of the Arbor on their collar pins. That told what needed telling better than any words. Garland's people bowed. Robb stepped forward, took the Tyrell's hand and found it hard and dry and warmer than he expected for a man who had ridden in rain. You have come without many men, he said. Either you are small in confidence or vast in trust. Trust, Garland said, and his smile showed for an instant the grin it had been when he was younger. The other sort would be an insult here. They went to convene behind oaken doors, the guards arranged, the servants chosen for their good ears, not their loose ones. Garland drew out sealed papers like loaves from a warm oven and set them in front of Caitlin to slice. He sipped northern ale politely and did not grimace. He spoke with careful brightness of roads and supply and the coin that would have to trickle under tables even as ships docked publicly with their honest cargo. Robb watched him and heard in the man's voice the same balanced cadence he had heard in the letter. The hand had changed there and the mouth changed here only when the point needed to be slipped past the guard. But even as they spoke of weights and wagon trains and how a simple widow in the Riverlands might see her lathe repaired if 5 extra men from the Reach laid hands to it, the marriage lay between them like an extra chair at table with no one sitting in it, and the meal could not be eaten without someone touching its back from time to time to remind himself or the others that it had not been forgotten. You speak for your sister? Robb asked at last, the iron of the question covered by the grammar of courtesy. I speak for my grandmother, Garland said. Not quite the answer to the question asked, and let the quiet after that fall like the last sheet of rain when clouds break. But I bring her will and my sister's face together with my own thought, your grace. And what is your thought? That winter will come, Garland answered simply. And that bread is a banner as sure as any silk, and that banners matter. It does not matter how finely we write the numbers if you and my sister cannot stand in a courtyard together and make men say to themselves, I would follow that pair because they look as if they could make the world stand up straighter. Caitlin looked down to hide her mouth. Roose Bolton showed his teeth and made it seem like something generous. Brynden looked at Robb. Your sister, Robb said slowly. I know what the singers sing. And what do they sing? There was mischief in Garland's eyes for a heartbeat, the sort that comes from being a third son whose cleverness has had to amuse himself in rooms where the firstborn takes most of the air. That she could smile a city into putting down its knives, Robb said and shrugged. They sing many like things. I have put little faith in singers since. He stopped. The room narrowed for a breath. Since. They also sing that your wolf can smell a liar from a mile and a half, Garland said lightly. I will not ask that you require your companion to do me the dishonor of deciding which song is truer than the other. Grey Wind, who had slipped into the hall and gone to lie under the long table where he could feel the feet of every man and judge them by their weight, rolled his eyes toward the Tyrell lord as if the talk bored him, then yawned cavernously and let out a low, impatient wind. Do not worry, the great John said cheerfully. If you spin us lies, he will eat your leg. If you tell us truths we cannot bear to hear, he will eat your leg also. He is not particular in his politeness. Garland bowed his head toward the wolf whenever one acknowledges the householder who sleeps by the hearth and knows the smell of strangers more acutely than their best friends do. Then I will attempt to tell those truths that match your appetites best. In the matter of ships and bread and men, see the seals and the sums. In the matter of marriage, I cannot bring my sister to your hall today. Nor would I. I know where the armies of the West wander. I know how long a cloak can hide a rose and how far a man with good eyes can see even in rain. But I bring these. He drew a smaller bundle from his belt, set it upon the table, and untied it. Inside lay 4 little things. A painted token on bone, a folded note with a ribbon the color of apple skins in autumn, a lock of hair braided with green silk, the green of moss in a well, and a pressed flower so pale it was nearly white, braced between two thin squares of horn. "Trifles," Garland said, but from her hands. She thought it wrong to ask a man to consider anything that would change his world without putting even one piece of herself upon the table. Robb did not move, but the room moved toward the little things the way water slides toward a sloping curve in the shore. The hair was honey brown where the silk held it, and where the hair escaped, there were glints the color of candle wax gone thin at the edge, almost translucent. The painted token showed a field of green with a single white rose in the center, the paint slightly cracked where a thumb had worried it more than once. The note had a weight that told its paper had been chosen with care and not for show alone. Caitlin took up the note and looked sideways at her son. When he inclined his head, she unfolded it. She read silently. When she did so, her face did not change, but her breathing did, a little. She passed the note to Robb. He had not asked her to read him anything, not since the night he had first buckled a sword on in anger and found that every sound grew harsh under his mother's telling. He read it himself and felt the words like a palm pressed first cool, then warm, upon his throat. "I do not offer you my hand as if it were a ship's rope, so that you may haul yourself up by it because the river is swift," the neat hand said. "I offer it also because I have watched rivers and I have learned they move in the manner that the banks allow them to move. We have walls and mills and fat land, and there is a way of seeing the world that says a woman's best work is to stand behind such things and to smile and to bid men consider their sweetness. I have done this work well, but I have also looked at maps and at account books and at the names of children who have been burned in their beds. I will not insult you by pretending one flower can make a summer. I will say instead that my garden likes rain, and the rain that falls from the north smells different. If we stand together, we can learn what scent it is. You are far from my sight. It is strange to like the sound of a man's name when one has never stood in a hall with him. And yet yours sounds clean to me. If you do not believe me, keep the rose. If you do, send it back to me when we meet." He turned the little square of horn. The ghost-pale rose pressed between the pieces was shadowed by something that might have been a finger moon where a petal had bruised before it had dried. The note's words were simple, but they were not naive. They were a woman's words who knew how to feed babies whose mothers had no milk, and how to persuade a lord to fix his bridge by convincing him that the bridge would admire him for it. Roose Bolton took the lock of hair between two fingers and rolled it. He set it down again, perfectly, precisely. "It is not a dowry," he observed. "It is a tour of a garden through a keyhole. And we are not even inside the maze," the great John said. "But the path smells of honey, and we are not stupid men." "Lady Caitlin," Garland said, "I ask permission to have the honor of seeing the godswood. They tell me your trees are different." "Our gods are different," Caitlin said. It was not cold as a rebuke, but it was not an invitation either. "The kings of my house sit beneath leaves that remember winter. That is what they say." "And you?" Garland's eyebrows rose, but he did not smile now. This was not mischief. This was something like respect. "What do you remember, my lady?" "I remember when my husband came home from war and did not smile at first," Caitlin said, "and how he put his hand upon a tree's bark and took off the glove and put his palm there too. How the bark had frost on it and he did not flinch. I remember that the gods were older than my mother's milk. You may walk in the wood if you do not expect it to answer you." Garland bowed. "I will not ask for answers," he said, "but I shall listen. Sometimes when people think they hear gods, it is only the wind. Listening to wind teaches a man how to move his ships." Roose Bolton glanced up, and his mouth smiled without his eyes. "You may have some northern blood in you yet, my lord. Or at least northern ears," Brynden said, and the quiet broke into talk again. They spoke until candle ends, of paths along which footmen might march, and which lordlings in the Reach could be counted upon to be brave when the road ran up and hard when it ran down, and what master of a house along the Mander might be susceptible to flattery and which to money. They spoke of the red wines and whether Paxter would risk Winterfell's war to spite the Lannisters who had insulted him when he had asked for a title in a season where titles flew like crows. They spoke of Freys. "Lord Walder is a man who counts," Caitlin said. He knows how to count, and he never loses count. If we must ask him to tally our offense and accept another sum in its place, we must be quick and precise and shameless." "Shameless," Garland repeated. "We excel there in the south. In the north we have no time for shame," the great John said, then laughed at his own inversion. "We have no time for much, now that I hear how long it takes a wagon to roll from Bitterbridge to Duskendale if the axle is a hair too thick." Garland rose at last when the candles had guttered so low that a breath would murder them all. He bowed to Robb and to Caitlin and to Brynden, and his men bowed to the household. He left the little things on the table and took with him only the respect he had been given and what he had earned with his careful talk. "Your Grace," he said at the door. He lifted his face toward Robb as a man might do in a forest when he senses an animal watching. Gray Wind had not moved, but his eyes glittered at the Tyrell. "My sister will come by sea if she comes, and to a northern port. If she comes, it will be with oars whose handles have been kissed by the hands of men who have poured wine for, and who have killed for, my family, so that you know exactly what sort of trust we offer." "To White Harbor," Brynden said. His eyes narrowed. "Interesting. We will speak of it again tomorrow," Garland answered, and was gone. They did speak, and the talk became sums and seals more than caution or hope. But that night, when the hall had emptied, and Caitlin had found a chair by an unquiet window somewhere to do the work of worry, Robb took the pressed rose and the note up to the rampart where the rain had polished each stone by day. The moon had got past the clouds. It hung half full and thoughtful. The river ran with a soft hiss as if it had been taught manners for a court. Gray Wind leaned against him like a wall of breath. He took the note out and read it again, because the hand and the words steadied him in a way he was ashamed to admit. He read the same sentence twice without moving his eyes much, and that sentence seemed to beat like a heart in the paper. "I will not insult you by pretending one flower can make a summer." He thought, not for the first time and not for the last, that he wanted to meet a woman who could write like that and speak like that and look at a map and see a future hiding in its corners like a cat. Behind him, a lighter step than he expected came along the battlement. He had known his mother by the weight of her stride for years. He knew Edmure by the scuff and the apology and the way the wind changed when he came to stand beside someone. This step was neither of those. "Lord Bolton," Robb said without turning. "Forgive me," Roose murmured. "Your wolf does not choose to rise, and so I considered myself safe enough to approach. Your Grace, if I may offer counsel that is more quiet than we served you in the hall." Robb slid the square of horn into his sleeve. How could I refuse a quiet counsel from a man who speaks more softly than water? He did not mask the weariness. 2 pieces only. Roose set his hands upon the parapet, palms flat. He had taken off his gloves. His fingers were pale and the nails well kept. The hands of a man who did not have dirt under his skin. "The first is that Lord Karstark will not forgive you if you take this path. He will pretend to, but his heart will become a weight you carry in one pouch and forget to count until you try to balance the other. The second is that if you are to bring this girl to White Harbor, you must send men you trust absolutely into the marshes to watch. The Ironborn have a custom of sensing when someone believes he has found a clever, safe path. They enjoy waiting along it. Marshes, Robb said. Moat Cailin, among other places. The Neck is a place where men vanish, Your Grace. May it be that in your reign they vanish in your service more often than against it." And Roose was gone, his footsteps light, the sort of light that leaves no print in wet dirt. Robb stood for a time after that and counted stones. He remembered having done that as a boy to keep his mind from breaking with worry when his father had ridden south with no date fixed for return. He reached 120, and he stopped because to go farther felt like superstition, and he had no time for that beside the superstitions he could not avoid. By the week's end, terms in ink had solidified where talk had spread like steam. Wagons would shift grain under other banners that could be persuaded to feign ignorance while carrying weight. Men would arrive by multiples of 20 in the train of minor lords, whose daughters would be given new gowns for winter, and whose sons would receive small horses and new belt knives and thus be bound by a kind of ribbon of debt. Ships would come to White Harbor under a pretense that would feel like truth to anyone who did not like to look at the underside of barrels. Letters would cross and cross again until a path had been plated out of words thick enough to carry the weight of a woman with the smell of summer in her hair stepping onto northern stone. Edmure took Robb aside in the little yard where their father had once taught them to arm themselves with tenderness and to hide it when it would not help. "Cousin," he said. "Walder Frye." "Cousin," Robb said back, because he had known this talk would not wait, and because sometimes repeating a man's address was the only way to force him to say the rest of what he had come to say. "Lord Walder will require something that he can show to others," Edmure said. "Not apologies, not almosts. A thing he can parade before his table 3 times a day and point to so that the fear he feels when he is alone in his bed at night does not choke him. He will not be content to be told that the king in the north found a rose sweeter than the twig he had promised to suck. I will give him something," Robb said. "Give him me," Edmure said, flushing as he spoke, absurd and brave and sincere. "I can make a Frye smile. I can be pleasant in a way that wives like. I can hold a child in one hand and a fishhook in the other and not drop either. I can lay down my pride where it will smother least. You must be the king. I can be the man who makes Walder Frye feel as if he has played his favorite trick and gotten away with something. You would wed his girl." Robb felt something ease in him like a knot loosened by an accidental brush of the hand. "Which girl? I do not know which he will choose to be softest in the right places," Edmure said, and for a moment he looked very tired. "But I will take whichever has the laugh that does not make my teeth hurt. And if she does not laugh, I will tell her stories until she does. It is a small thing, Robb, if it keeps an old man from nursing Hatter. And like a fire." Robb put his hand on Edmure's shoulder and squeezed. "You will be a good husband," he said, and heard his own voice make a promise even as his mind said that he could not promise anyone that or anything else for long. "I will write to Lord Walder." He did, and the writing was a weight and a relief both. He asked Caitlin to carry the letters to the maester herself, and when she had gone down the stair he sat with his quill dangling in his fingers and let his breath out slowly while gray wind slept and twitched upon the rushes with some dream that made his paws move as if he were running through snow. In Highgarden the rooms used for letters were large and bright and sweet with beeswax and the dust of powdered herbs. Margaery Tyrell sat in a chair carved with vineyard vines and played with the ring she did not wear yet and might never wear at all. Her grandmother had told her to occupy her hands with a pen, not with that foolish chain of thought, and so she did. She had already written what she had wanted to write. She had gone to her bed the night before and heard the crickets and the small sound of the water in the lion-headed fountain outside and thought of sleep as something that approached but never arrived, in the courteous southern way. In the morning she had woken with sentences in her head, one after the other like hems that needed stitching. "You are frowning." Lady Olenna's cane tapped the threshold and then the floor. The old lady came in with her hair veiled and her eyes sharp. A maid discreetly withdrew. "It will make lines. And then your mother will weep into her handkerchief about how her daughter's face will not soften any more than the bread from Old Town's third ovens." "I have decided lines may be weapons," Margaery said mildly. "I have never liked weapons, but men seem to talk to them with more attention than they grant to anything else." "Men talk to anything that pays them," Olenna said. "Even to common sense, if it arrives in the form of a girl who can read the sums on a harvest ledger and does not ask first for ribbons. How do you like your map?" Margaery turned the half-finished sheet toward her. She liked to draw their lands herself when talking was to be undertaken. The act of setting rivers and roads and hills onto paper as curving lines and dots had calmed her since she had been a girl. It reminded her that everything one moved in life had a weight and an incline and a tendency, and that if you pushed too hard at a wrong angle you would break more than you lifted. She had drawn the Mander fat and green. The rivers that ran out to the narrow sea were slender and needed little repair. She had drawn the trident without its deltas. She did not know where a northern woman's eye rested when she looked at that part of the world, so she had shaded it over with pale green as if to say, "Here grows something we do not yet understand." "I like it well," she said, "and I like him." She smiled as she said it, expecting and accepting what her grandmother's face became. "You do not know him. You know the things we know. You know that he rides where he thinks he must, which may mean he will ride where he does not have to, and then he will be wounded in a place where the scar will make it harder for him to sit a horse when the winter calls him to ride. You are like your mother in one way. You like to think the best of men. You are like me in another. You have learned not to be surprised when the best turns out to be a credit we cannot spend in the place we are. Margaery turned the pen in her fingers and set it down. The lock of hair she had given Garland had been cut with surprisingly steady hands. She had thought that perhaps she would tremble, but she had not. Afterward, she had gone out into the garden and crouched by the thyme until the bees had told her with their bodies that she was too close, and then she had cried a very little, not for the hair but for the way time moved in the world without asking anyone if it suited them. "He has a wolf," she said. "A real one. I know what he has," Olenna said. "He also has a dead father and a mother who can count better than half the men in our court. He has an army that loves him as well as some men can love another man without making churchmen sneeze. He has a name that is not loud and not long, and that is harder for the singers. And he has a problem with a bridge." I would prattle about all of these things for hours if I could. Instead, I must tell you that we can send you by sea if you must go. The red wine fleet owes more to our wine than to our good sense, and we can mark out paths even through narrow places. You may be seen, or you may not be. Margaery looked at her grandmother. The old woman's eyes had lines all around them, the sort that came from laughter and curiosity and contempt, and all of those things sat easily upon her. "You do not think I should go. I think you should not mind going," Olenna said. "And I think we should make sure we do not go for nothing. The boy will wed you if he has counted correctly. If he has not, he is not a boy. He is a fool. And then we shall do something else. I do not bemoan chances not taken. We invent another chance and take that one." Margaery nodded. She put her fingers on the map where the north melted into that pale shading. "What does it smell like?" she asked softly. "Like iron and old weather," Olenna said without pause. "Like a man who has washed in cold water and not with rose water. Like wood smoke that has had pine needles put upon it. You will not like it, and then you will like it very much." "Loras will not," Margaery said, and turned a little in her chair so her grandmother would not see her smile because she did not want to be scolded for teasing. "He does not like things that will not yield to him." "Loras likes things that he can defeat," Olenna said, and for once kindness edged her tone. "He is a spear arranged into a man. He hurts when he is not used. He is not good at the work of laying in stores for winter. You are." Margaery touched the letter she had written. She had thought about making it more charming, more like the things she had seen younger women write to older men when they wanted to be desired. It had made her feel tired. Instead, she had written of mills and of children and of the way rain fell on different parts of the world. She had told herself while she wrote it that if he were the sort of man who liked women to write the other sort of letter, then she would endure it. But she would feel something hard behind her smile that had not been there for Renly, and that she did not want to bring into a hall that looked upon a godswood that had not learned to be graceful to please anyone. "You will not take flowers when you go," Olenna said. "You will take bread and salt and a cloak that will keep you from looking like a spring branch in frost. You will go like a lady who knows what a yard of wet wool weighs and does not mind. And I will braid my hair like a northern girl," Margaery said. And this time when she smiled, she saw how her grandmother's mouth twitched despite herself. "Because I like heavy hair. It makes men think of something rooted, not something that can be plucked." "Take the veil with you anyway," Olenna said. "There are men who must be coaxed with softness even when they think themselves hard. And be ready to bend when you have to, but not too often. You will crack if you do." "I have been bending since I grew breasts," Margaery said. "I have not cracked yet." Her grandmother laughed, the small, unpretty laugh that Margaery liked best. "Then you are your mother and not your aunt. Good. Send your letter then. Give your brother your hair. Kiss your father's cheek as if you believed he understood which way the wind was blowing and why. Then go and talk to the maids and the women who clean the floors. They will tell you which part of the city will smell worst when the rain does not come in time. Find a way to make it smell less. It will cost less coin than you think and earn us a better story than any little thing the bards can be paid to fling." Margaery rose because her body had been trained to answer a cane's tap with movement before talk. But she paused and looked at her map again, tracing with her finger the line of coast north of King's Landing, the little crescent that cradled White Harbor. The name itself pleased her, as if it were a cup set down before her that she might drink from, simple and plain and warm in winter. That night the red wine ships rocked in their moorings, and a man with narrow feet and a good memory carried a note to an oarsman's wife that told her to tell her cousin in the market to buy 10 more sacks of the flour that was going to be cheap next week for reasons no one would speak aloud. Everything moved when a marriage moved. Bread prices changed. Women whispered. Old men counted and tried to pretend they had known all along this particular set of numbers would add up to this particular sum. And somewhere far away where the river was at once red and gray and patient, Walder Frye took Robb Stark's letter and opened it and read it with a lip that could not decide whether to pout or curl. He read it twice, and then he called 3 of his sons to him and then 3 more, and by the time he had called the daughters he had started to forget which he had summoned and which had come in because they had seen the movement in the dukes and the hands and knew that movement among men meant that present had been unwrapped and things put upon a table. "He will give us Edmure," he said, and tasted the name like an old piece of mutton that had been salted too well. Well then, that is a thing, a nice thing, a juicy thing." He set the letter aside and put his thin hands together and said nothing for a long while. Down in the kitchens, a girl drew water and thought of how long the river ran and wondered whether spring would bring fish in number enough to make the nets worthwhile. It comforted her to think about the river, which did not change its mind when a king had an idea. In the marshes of the Neck, men in leather cloaks and with laughter that could disappear when they wished it to move with the frogs, and the reeds began to draw lines in the mud with their fingers and argue in whispers about which clump of brush would hide a man best from iron-born eyes. Some of them were crannogmen who had not cared about kings as anything other than distant men whose edges leaked down into their world as rust when swords were not cleaned. But when asked to guard a path for a bride, some of them smiled, because the thought of bringing a girl from a place where the sap never slept up into the land where trees cracked with winter had a kind of story sense. Stories wanted that sort of thing to be tried, and they would help if they could. Robb went to the Godswood because sleep would not come. The trees there were not as old as Winterfell's trees, because none were. These were not his father's trees, even the one with the face carved in, which watched him with its dark mouth and its eyes like ponds in a drought. He stood there in the stillness while leaves let down the last small traveling drops of the day's rain and thought about lying down upon the wet earth and asking the ground to tell him anything. He wanted something terribly simple. He wanted his father to kneel and untie one knot that had tightened around his chest. He wanted a hand upon his head the way a hand had rested there once when he had been small and had believed hands to be made for blessing and restraint, not command and sacrifice. The face in the weirwood did not move, but somewhere a bird rustled. Then a breath of wind came and went. He was very tired. Gray wind came to stand beside him as a second tree might stand beside a man, and the wolf's breath was warm. Robb reached out and laid his hand upon the carved bark, and the cold climbed his wrist as if to test the blood there. He thought of a hall filled with men who watched his mouth. He thought of a woman with a rose pinned to her bosom who could read ledgers. He thought of his sister, Sansa, who would have laughed at Margaery's dress and known exactly how many inches of hem should be taken up to flatter a waist with what sort of bodice. He thought of Arya, who would have stolen the lock of hair and ridden with it braided into her own and said she had done it out of mockery but would have kept it nevertheless. He thought of Bran and Rickon, and then he stopped thinking because he could not afford what thinking their names did to the muscles of his face. "You," he said softly to the tree, and hated the plea in the word. "I will put my hand to it. Only do not wound the people who do not deserve it any more than they have been wounded." Someone behind him drew a breath. He turned and saw his mother watching him with her hands in her sleeves. She came forward the way women go into a room where a man's heart lies, careful not to disturb any little thing that might be delicate. "I sent a hawk," she said, her voice quiet as leaves falling. "To White Harbor, to Manderley. He will be ready." "He will have to be," Robb said. "Will you go with her, Mother?" When she comes. Do you wish me to? I wish you near. He smiled without knowing he had done it, a worn, unpracticed thing. But if you go south to White Harbor while I am here, there will be those who say I sent my heart to meet a southern girl so that I might begin to forget my northern gods. They are men who will say anything. I ought not to give them the words. Caitlin nodded. My brother will go. And your uncle. The Blackfish knows what men behind walls look like when they intend to betray those who come smiling to their gates. He will know when to turn back. He always has. Will she come? He did not mean the question to sound young. The gods would made him younger despite himself. She will. She is hungry, not for food, for work, and she is clever. Clever women want to stretch themselves. Perhaps she will stretch us as well. If she does, it may hurt a little, but I think it will not hurt the way you fear. He nodded because he did not trust what his mouth would do if he tried to say more. They stood together, wolf and woman and man, and the weirwood watched and did not judge as the night watched and did not judge. It was a good thing for a king, sometimes, to be looked at by something that would not grant him grace just because he had men who would call him your grace. When morning came, light slid over water and stone, thin as a new blade. Garland made his prayers to the seven in a room that had been cleared for him. He did it quickly and with his head bent because he could feel the eyes that watched him not for blasphemy but for information. Afterward, he found the God's Wood and walked in it with his hands clasped like a man in a museum who does not trust himself not to touch the artifacts. He hummed a little. He had a good voice. He had learned not to use it when he needed men's minds on their work. On the third day, a raven came with Paxter Redwine's seal. Robb broke it with fingers that had learned to be gentle because kindness, when given to things that could not feel it, practiced the hand to carry it better when the right head appeared beneath it. Paxter's words smelled of salt and calculation. He would dispatch 4 ships with casks that could be left at Gulltown if the winds turned traitor, and he would do it because the Queen had sent a part of her wine business to a lesser cousin in Old Town without telling him. There are many ways to move a man. Pettiness is one of them. On the 5th day, a second letter from Highgarden arrived by the hand of a Hightower man, whose cloak had held the rain off so long the water had set itself into a shape upon it like wrinkles in a fine face. Margaery's hand had written 3 lines only, but they were 3 lines that felt like a step taken upon a stair that had been measured and carved and dried to hold just such a foot. I will come. I will bring the bread. I will meet you where the sea gives itself to the river and the river consents to be guided into the land. Tell your uncle to stand upon the wall and watch the horizon. When he thinks he sees birds gathering where no island is, he will be seeing me. He folded that small note into the larger one under horn. He kept them both in his sleeve. He went to the hall where men were already gathering and told them the plan, and no one shouted because shouting would not have changed the wind. Karstark was not there. His absence was a weight hung across the room. Edmure's earnestness lightened it, and the Greyjohn's laughter, and Roos's smooth counsel that glided in to fill any emptiness that might suddenly seem to everyone like a drop. Your Grace, Roose said, and here there was a softness, a new thing. If I may, choose the gift you will send her. Gift? You are a king, Bolton said. Kings forget sometimes that other men like to carry things. We are carrying your war. Give us this, at least, that we may carry a piece of the part that is not war. Allow us to bring her something with roots that can be set down here so that it grows. Preferably something that will survive winter, but I defer to your mother in matters of horticulture. Caitlin breathed a laugh. We are to plant happiness like a hedge, she said. Very well, we will do it. There is a tree the old women here use for tea when their bellies ache. It grows leaved like a lance and tastes a little of smoke. If she can learn to like it, she will have made a step toward us. It will take a year before it is anything a lady can look at without frowning, the great John said, and slapped the table with a huge hand. All the better. Let her come to love ugly things that become useful. Then she will have learned the north. In White Harbor, the air smelled of fish and wet wool and clean, salty cold. The Manderleys had built their house to show their wealth the way a woman brave enough to go bare-armed in winter shows her arms because they are warm enough without sleeves. Bricks stood warm under the northern sky, and the water lapped against pilings that had learned their tide with patience, not with edges. The maester there had been sent a raven ahead of time, and so he rose earlier than usual and sent boys down to the quays to make sure that the nets that might have been strung across the harbor mouth to dissuade raiders were lowered and weighted toward friendship. The harbor master's wife put on her second-best gown because her first-best gown smelled of lavender in a way she felt would be insulting to girls who came from a place where the very air had fingers that could make flowers open even when it was not their turn. The sea held its breath. Men who had been hired not to know what they were hired for stood upon the seawall with their mouths open as if they might catch anything that fell out of the sky. The gulls brawled and fretted and then quieted. And then there upon the horizon where the water darkened most stood a scrape of white. The scrape broke into 5 smaller scrapes, and then into 20, and then they resolved into sails, cutting the light into dignified strips. "Birds," the blackfish said beside the lord of the harbor, and his teeth showed a little. The harbor lord had never seen a man that old look so pleased in that way. "Aye, birds that know their way to a northern berth." The oars went down with a neatness that would have been surprising in a floating house. It was astonishing on water. The lead ship came in as if it had been born in this harbor. And there at the prow, under a hood at first because some woman had told her to guard her face from the slap of the wind, and then with the hood thrown back because another woman inside her had told her not to come behind anything, stood a girl with her hair braided in 3 heavy ropes. She did not wear southern flowers. She had wrapped herself in gray over green, not gaudy Virgin's Day fabric, but wool with a weight and fall that made the women on the quays who knew what things weighed nod to themselves. Her cheeks were pinked by the wind. She put her hand to the rail when the ship made its last turn and smiled at the people who had come to stare, and there was gratitude in that smile as if to tell them she knew she had entered not only their city but their sight, and she would do her best not to stumble. The blackfish stepped forward when the gangplank fell with the thump that meant the ship had decided to be a piece of land for a time. He did not bow. He looked. He had learned that to be looked at by the right man tells a person who they are better than any titles on paper. She lifted her chin and looked back as if she were not afraid of the world's deciding her too heavy or too light. "Lady Margaery," he said, "I am Brynden Tully. I am to see you safe to a boy who thinks he must be older than he is and who is attempting to accomplish what would take 3 men their entire lives. Are you ready to help him?" "Yes," she said simply. "I am ready, but first I must deliver bread." They brought her baskets to carry through the crowd, and she did carry one herself, causing the women to look, and a low sound went through them, young and old, the sort of sound that can harden or soften a city in the space of a day. She put loaves into hands, while around her the red wine men carried casks onto the wharf, and the high tower captain spoke in murmurs to men who needed the kind of words that turn into coin without moving through the air as speech. "Welcome to the north," the blackfish said at last in a tone that suggested the north were not exactly what the map drew. "You'll want a cloak that holds in its heat." "I have one," she said, and then she laughed at herself because she had been told to make the first joke about the cold herself so that no man with kindness would feel he must attempt it. "Perhaps I have too." Behind her, the men moved with ropes and with patience in equal measure. The casks thumped like a drumbeat of something new approaching. On a distant wall, the merman's servants lit lanterns made of horn, and the light along the edge of the harbor became honey-colored, sheltering. In Riverrun, Robb stood with his hand on Grey Wind's back when the messenger came into the hall with his cheeks full of sea air. He held out a sealed letter, and the seal was the same white rose pressed upon green. Robb did not have to read it. He did anyway, said simply, "I am here." He let his breath out and felt something in the world answer him. It was not the godswood, and it was not the hall. It was not his mother's eyes, and it was not the river. It was the sense that a thing he had thrust his hand toward in the dark had taken his fingers, lightly, and without fear, which was in itself a kind of gift. He could not ride that afternoon or the next. But he sent the blackfish a letter, and he sent men by the safest paths, and he told himself in the way men tell themselves things to give themselves courage that the world would not punish him for this. He had done regicide, men would call it later in their fancy talk, on no king at all. He had executed the kind of certainty that had held him by the throat since boyhood, that a vow made to a man like Walder Frye could never be offset by anything as frail as a basket of bread and a girl with the habit of reading ledgers. He sent also, impulsively and then defiantly, the little pressed rose, wrapped back into horn with a note of his own. You wrote truly that one flower does not make a summer. Keep this so that when winter comes you will remember that it cannot turn every petal to ice. She held that horn between her palms when she went up into the chamber the Manderleys had readied for her. It was smaller than the room's S. He had known, and the windows were not as high, and the bedstead carried the smell of the last woman who had slept upon it, something like lye soap and like smoke. She put the horn on the little table by the bed and looked at it until it seemed to shift in the candlelight, more pale and more green by turns. Then she took off her cloak, and underneath the gray wool she wore linen that would be considered plain by a man who did not know that the needlework along the hem represented a day of a girl's life. She undid her hair slowly until it fell upon her back and then braided it again, faster than her maid would have been able to, because she had learned to do her own hair when servants fled from sickness in a summer 5 years ago, and she had found out then that a woman can be her own maid when she must. She slept with her hands folded like a penitent and dreamed of a hall where she could hear water without seeing it, and of a boy with a wolf who had the sort of mouth that would smile in ways that would make older men uncomfortable because it made them remember their sons. She rose at first light and broke her fast upon eggs and fish and dark bread that tasted of molasses, and then she went down to the harbor again and walked among those who had nothing to do with her arrival. When a fisherwoman asked her what she was doing, she said, "Learning where the wind likes to hit a face here." And the woman laughed and said, "From everywhere." And that seemed a thing to remember. 3 days later they rode, not gay, not slow, not with an arrogance that would have made the river gods throw bumps in the path for pleasure. They moved like the drift of a leaf that knows which way it wants to go. The blackfish did not talk much, but when he did his voice was like a good whetstone. If you let it work upon your mind's edge, it made it keener. Margaery listened to him speak of carts and forage, of the right ways to ask men who had lost children where they had buried them, and of when not to ask at all. He said nothing about Robb unless she asked. When she did, he said small and careful things, all of them true, all of them exactly the size of a single truth and no larger. On a morning bright as hammered pewter they came within sight of Riverrun's towers. The banners hung furled because the air had turned to watch the newcomers instead of playing. The water spoke to its stones. Gray wind was upon the wall in a way, though he was below it, waiting, his head turned toward the road. He smelled damp wool and beeswax and the clean meat salt that clung to the blackfish even though they had not hunted. Robb came down before any could announce him and before any could position themselves to be noticed. He came as a man who cannot walk as slowly as his training tells him he must because his pulse has set his body to a slightly different rhythm, and he wants to match that rhythm before it goes. He wore plain armor because he had learned that if he put too much on, people would speak to the gold and not to him. He had no crown upon his hair. He had brought only himself and the wolf, and the quiet behind him that an army makes when it wills itself not to frighten a girl. The gatehouse swallowed the southern party one by one, and then they were in the yard where men had wrestled and taken bruises and found their lungs again for a year. She dismounted with a little less grace than she liked. That pleased her. She preferred not to be too smooth. He took 2 steps. She took 2 steps. They were not close enough to touch yet. A wind went between them that had not been there until they had drawn near. She lifted her face. He looked exactly as she had known he would not look, because the mind invents a stranger and then reality brings someone whose weight sits upon the ground differently. He seemed less tall than she had expected and more rooted. His hair was less red than the singers sang, and what of it was red was rawer, as if it had been cut by a river rock when he was a child and never had stopped being rinsed by that water. His eyes had the color of forgotten wine left in a goblet and exposed to cold until it thickens. He looked and she looked back, and for a moment they were 2 people who had both been made to carry too much of other people's hunger for a world that would behave. "Lady Margaery," he said. "Your Grace," she answered. Gray wind came forward and set his nose in the air near her wrist and made a sound that would have been called a chuff if a dog had made it. She did not reach for him. She expected him to choose whether he would come to her. He did, stepping that last little piece of distance with his head turned a little to show that he respected the creature who held his bond and not just the creature who smelled of new. "May I?" she asked the wolf, and then, smiling at herself, at the king. "May I, your grace?" "You must not ask me," Robb said, not smiling. "You must ask him." She bent her head. "May I?" The great animal's amber eye regarded her with the level seriousness wolves have learned after 1,000 winters. He breathed again into her palm. Then he pressed his muzzle to her hand and accepted the touch, his fur damp and powerful beneath her fingers. She felt a humming like a bow upon a string move through her arm and into her ribs. She stood up and met the king's eyes again and saw in them a softening that would make other men tell jokes later in the hall. Jokes they would think she did not understand. "Welcome," he said, and now he smiled. And it was the smile she had sensed in the letter, carefully, as if it were a blade also, because everything could be a blade. "We have bread. And salt," she said. "And salt." He led her into the hall. Catelyn met them at the threshold, and Margaery stopped because she felt something move in her chest that she had not expected. Respect that was not of the courteous kind, but the kind that one soldier feels for another when they have both seen an iron trick and survived it. She bowed her head, but not too low, because for a woman to bow low to another woman had meanings men liked to invent later for their own comfort. "You have been braver than I," Catelyn said, not loudly, but with a clarity that made the men nearby understand that their small noises would have to become smaller. "I would not have left my own harbor during the reign of such confusion." "Your Grace," Margaery said, and then, at Catelyn's small shake of the head, "My lady, I had bread to deliver. I like carrying things." "Good. Then you will not mind what the North puts upon your shoulders." Catelyn's mouth shifted. "We have a tree we wish to give you. It smells like smoke, and before long you will like it very much." She looked over Margaery's shoulder, counted something with her eyes, and nodded once to the blackfish with the pride of a woman who has seen her brother both carry and throw weight for a lifetime. They ate the bread and the salt before anyone could say a thing about formalities. It mattered because there are forms of safety that require a man to put a piece of a thing into his mouth and swallow it before his better sense gets in the way. After that, even Walder Frey's crows would have had to be clever to peck through the bond that had been made. And when evening fell, they lit the cressets and the hall felt closer, warmer, more like a piece of a world that had chosen to be small for a few hours to allow people who had carried too much to set down some of their burdens on the floor. Men told stories. Garland told one about a pig in a parson's garden that made the Great John roar. Brynden told one about a fish too big to fit in any net that made Edmure insist on arguing about whether such fish can exist. Roose smiled and said little. Karstark did not come. No one spoke of why, no one needed to. Robb had not planned a dance. He had not planned music. He was learning to fear plans for any part of a day that might be sweet, because sweetness so often feels like a boast to the gods. And yet a boy with a reed pipe and a girl with a drum affixed itself to the wall by the high table and made their own music, soft, as if making it only for the people at the table and not for the room. Men settled their shoulders. The room breathed. Margaery accepted a cup of dark cider and the piece of cheese that went with it with a gravity that made women nod approval in spite of themselves. Her eyes moved over the hall with the same care she had used to draw the shaded place on her map. She was not counting the faces. She was learning where the warmth lay, and where the cold, and where the place near the hearth was that a girl with a baby would sit because she would know herself welcome but still want a straight path to the door if she needed to run. She filed that knowledge away as a good housewife does the location of an extra needle. Robb waited until men had had their fill of first looking and first talking and had stopped turning their heads each time she moved as if they were half-drunk crows. He approached her then as a man approaches a lake in which he means to bathe. Not hurriedly, but not as if he doubts his right, and with an understanding that cold will rise. He held out his hand. "Will you walk?" he asked. "Yes," she said, and there was that second note beneath her voice, like a string that had been plucked and set humming deliberately because music was a thing that happens when men and women decide they want it and not just when minstrels force it from an instrument. They walked out into the walled garden that had been coaxed from the river's breath over the years. The night smelled of damp earth and apples left too long in a basket. The torches in their iron brackets hummed with small insects. Gray wind came after with the sound a winter river makes when it rolls a stone, and lay down where he could see both of them and the door. "I had thought to bring you a gift," Robb said. He was awkward now that there were no eyes watching his mouth for the shapes of his words. "But the men who advised me told me I could only give you things made of roots, and that if I brought anything else it would look as if I trusted the wrong parts of the world." "You mean the parts that cannot be planted," she said and smiled. "They are not wrong, but I would have liked a book, or a piece of a map, or a child's drawing of a home. Those are roots of another sort." He turned. There was the boy he had been for a moment, raw and eager, and then there was the man again, measuring. "Then I will give you those, after the tree." They walked the perimeter of the little garden, and he told her how the rivers braided, and she told him how grain moves more safely if the wagons carry also the material for tents for women to shelter their babies by the road. He told her how far a man can march upon 7 slices of bread and small beer, and she told him that women use salt more sparingly than men and can make brine do 3 things at once if you give them the right baskets. He told her he had once believed he knew what justice was and had learned that it is men and not gods who must carry it. She did not tell him she had known that all along, because that would have been unkind. Instead, she told him she had once put 3 loaves into a widow's hands, and that the widow had dropped one because she had forgotten what weight felt like when one carried it for a good reason rather than for a cruel one. They came at last upon the bench near the pool where the fish rose only when they were very sure the night had not folded over them. They sat. Their shoulders did not touch, but their breaths made a rhythm no minstrel would have mocked. He looked at her hand where it lay upon her knee as if it were a thing he had to memorize in a test he had not known he would have to take. "I broke an oath today," he said quietly. "I had not yet announced it, but I broke it when I told my uncle to ride to White Harbor. I broke it when I read your letter and felt what I felt. I will break it again tomorrow when I tell the men formally and let the words be a thing other men put their fingerprints on." He looked at her as if asking whether she would turn away. "I do not ask you to praise me for it. I ask you to know that I have done it not because I desired you so much that it unmade my sense. I have done it because I am tired of starving, and because you write like a person who will not stand behind me with a hand only ready to be kissed." She turned to him then, and there was a little light from the torch above them in her eyes and a little of the water because the pool caught those torch fires and made them small and perfect. "Do you want me to kiss your hand, Robb Stark?" she asked, and he felt the name as it left her mouth. "No," he said, and then he grinned because the boy had forced himself out. "Yes, sometimes. And sometimes I want you to slap it. And sometimes I want you to take it and make me put it upon a child's fevered forehead so that I will remember what heat is when it matters." "Good," she said softly. "Then we will not do the first thing too often. The children will make us do the third thing enough to make us tired of it." He laughed, not because the joke was clever, but because the joke pierced that place in him he had made very hard, and a laugh came out of it like a bird flying accidentally through a window that had been flung upon for air. Gray wind lifted his head and rumbled, happy and jealous both. Robb stood. He offered her his hand again, and she took it. This time they did not look to see who watched. Above them, on the walls, the guards watched and pretended not to. Behind them, in the hall, men's voices rose and fell. Somewhere in the city, a woman named no one in particular and thanked the salt for letting her make soup thick enough to fool her boys for one more night. Tomorrow there would be papers to sign, and a tight-faced man would come with a letter from Walder Frye that tore its own edges as men read it. Tomorrow a Northman would find a boy whose hair had never grown long yet sitting beside a river and teach him to set a hook properly and not to jerk too quickly, or else he would not catch what he tried for. Tomorrow crows would learn new paths, and the Ironborn would drift nearer to places where men had thought them too proud to wade. Tomorrow the winter would creep a finger farther along the rim of the world. Tomorrow might hold grief. It would hold certainty. It would hold work. Tonight a king and a woman who had learned that queenship may be simply a very hard manner of housekeeping stood side by side in a small garden and breathed the same air. And nowhere did a god look down and snarl. The water moved. The torch ate itself lower. A flower pressed between 2 squares of horn lay on a table in a chamber up the stair, and in the press of its petals was the faintest scent of summer, very far and very near.